topic is called Unseen, How Non-Gamer Input on Change can change and improve art and storytelling in games. A really important topic because we often need to listen to non-gamers to improve games. So I would like to introduce Angel Luis Sucasas Fernandez from Tequila Works to present this topic.
Hi, can you see me?
Yes, we can see you.
Okay, I'm going to pick the virtual one. Just a second. Okay. So we are ready to start. Oh, I don't hear you right now.
Yes, go for it. You're ready.
Okay, perfect. So I'm going to share here my screen. Okay. You are seeing my screen now, no?
Yes, we can see it fine.
Okay, so let's go to the presentation. Okay, I'm going to start with who am I very quickly. I'm 35. I'm called Angel Sucasas. I'm the narrative director of Tequila Works, but I do lots of stuff like other indie games. I'm a novelist. I write for TV and movies. I write for papers and I teach class, so I keep myself entertained and doing a lot of stuff. But my major occupation is being the narrative director of Tequila Works, of the whole studio, and keep an eye on every project that we are doing in everything related to storytelling and narrative design. So the story that I'm going to tell you, because I'm a storyteller and I can help myself to start this presentation, is something that happened during this Christmas with my father and my mother. So the first thing that I have to do is to present my father and my mother to yourselves. This is my father. He's 60 years old. He's a professor in the university, but he's also a writer. He's a specialized on Holocaust and has write and teach and do many talks throughout the world, from Israel, United States, every country in Latin America. So he's quite deep into that. His hobby is cinema and writes books about cinema too. And he's a video game indifferent, we could say. He doesn't condemn video games, but he doesn't have much of an interest for it. Though when he was, like when I was like 9 years old, he became sort of hooked by Sonic on the Game Gear, and he was able to finish the game every day for more than 2 years with more than 1 million points. So indifferent, but sometimes curious. About my mom is 60 years old also. She's an ex-professor of philosophy because she has retired this year. She also writes. His hobby is being an artist. You can see there, his drawings and his sculptures. And she's a video game hater, a common video game hater. He hates the whole thing. She's very happy that her grandson can grow well because I'm successful in this career, but he hates video games a lot. So this happened on the Christmas. They were here in Madrid because they are for the north of Spain. And we were watching, my father and I, Red Dead Redemption 2, because he's a very big fan of Westerns, especially, John Ford, Howard Hawks, classic Westerns for the 30s and 40s. And we were having this conversation that I'm going to dramatize a little bit. So first myself, I said, so what do you think, Dad? And my dad said, it's impressive, yes. And suddenly my mom comes into the background and says, what are you seeing? And I answer, Red Dead Redemption 2, it's a wild realistic take on Western like Cormac McCarthy. And she interrupt myself and say, in one of the shots where the characters were in a close-up, they look like toys. So boom, my head explodes because it was like, I can't get it. How she can say something like they look like toys? If this is one of the crowniest achievements of this generation in everything related to photorealism and and being immersed in an atmosphere that seems almost as real as reality. But a little bit later, I put both of them in the helmet of PlayStation VR and made them play Tetris Effect. Also, I made them play Super Hypercube and another thing, also with gameplay, with a simple gameplay mechanics. And they were amazed, both my mom and my dad. With my dad it's more easy, but he even said how much you said one of these cost, because he was amazed. But my mom was amazed too, and it was not only amazed by the visuals, he was amazed about the whole experience, about being able to play something that she played, like Tetris, in this incredible immersed way. So that led me thinking a lot about things I was reading from that time related to how to grow the market of video games and how to bridge, how to fill the gap between gamers and non-gamers. Especially, I was thinking about two things that I read this year. One was this interview in Gama Sutra with Nobuya Nakasato, that, as you well know, is one of the biggest creators of Contra, and he has created one of my favorite games in all time, that is Contra Hard Cops. It's just an amazing game from every point of view. And she said in this interview, the game market is going to be in trouble unless we look towards the long term and reorient ourselves towards what makes games fun to play. This was an interview related to the age of Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3, that, as you know, was an age of gaming more devoted to find a mainstream audience. And the problem here, especially in Japan, was that we try to reach the mainstream audience by trying to copycat cinema and spectacularity of cinema. And that is very well done already by cinema. So the theory of Nakasato is that for a time they were very attracted to this, and as we lower the difficulty of the games, they were quite into playing a movie. But after a while they'll become uninterested because they have already that in movies, and that made a big hole in some industries, especially in Japan, because they were used to center everything in making the game fun, in making the mechanics fun, and suddenly they center on they focus on making the games very visually appealing, but not a little bit more hollow in the gameplay side. And the other thing that I was thinking a lot, this is one person that I know very well. She's a friend. We meet together in a Middle East conference in Iran, and it was amazing to hear her made a conference to an audience that was more females than males in a game designer, kind of ambience in Iran. So that was amazing, and it really struck us, both of us. And as you know, she made a very, 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 very polemic and also important conference about video games are boring. That was a conference on GDC, and she was, reflecting on his own experience, on her own experience with friends that were very interested into art, but it was almost impossible to get them interest into games. So that was a very important conference for me, and I think it's a very important conference for the medium. I want to rescue this quote. What forms of art and entertainment are most relevant now? Collage, memoir? No, it should be video games, interactive entertainment. Yet many people don't like video games. Why? So I mixed these two with the conversation that I have in Christmas with my mom and dad, and I started to think very deeply and also to ask many ex-gamers, long gamers of the 8-bit age or 16-bit age, and non-gamers at all, to trying to grasp this question, what can we do? Because we have seen with the launch at Stadia that the numbers are still not there, but we are seeing that the technology starts to close to have all the media in the same platform. So the competition is going to be even more direct between games, movies, music, comics, literature, and we have to think how to compete in this arena. So I came with 3 conclusions for my talks with many non-gamers. And the first one is related to art. I'm going to divide it in art, design, and narrative because I get inputs in all of that. And I started to work in how, it's impossible to solve this only by talking with people, but starting to think how we can approach this problem. So the first thing that I noticed with art and non-gamers is that non-gamers have a much sharper eye than hardcore gamers as myself to the photorealistic approach because they see all the things, all the nuance that they are still not there. We only see in the evolution, and this is, something video game, it's something very, very, very popular in our medium to talk about teraflops and how many polygons you can move. It's getting less popular these last 5 years, but there still is a trend to talk about this stuff. But for them, is like watching a movie of toys that doesn't move very well, and there is a lot of details there that just look awful. So I think one of the biggest things of talking with them I get in the art department is how far we are away of what we think we have already grasped. Because for their standards, they look like toys, like my mom says. So that made me think that a possible solution, of course, is bet more for non-photorealistic approaches. So the conclusion will be in this line, bet more for non-photorealistic approaches, erase the uncanny valley. Also allows more emotion. You only have to see what happened with the Lion King in CGI photorealistic with the faces of the characters and the emotion they convey versus the original one. Also increase the immersion in the game world because we have our own rules of what works and what not. And that's something that animation has in general. And if we are not mimicking the reality, we can create our own reality and our own rules. And inside that rules, it's very difficult to find uncanny valleys because they are the rules of our own game world. And also attracts more non-gamer people, especially in the female audience. I have been noticing with games like Grease, Cuphead, our own game in Tequila, Rhyme. Of course, every major mobile game has a non-photorealistic approach, or almost any major mobile game has a non-photorealistic approach. So we see there great commercial success. We see that attract non-gamer people, and we still don't bet as much as we should in the console and PC area. So I think this is one of the things that we can do better. Design. Design is very related to what Contra Creator said. And this is a little counterintuitive because if you hear comments like, conference like Bright Code, you start to think that you have to do games maybe less about the game itself and more about the experience. But I think that's not the case. The case, or what I get for the non-gamer people, and especially ex-gamers people that left the medium at 8-bit or 16-bit, is that for them, there is an impossible gap in the control path. Something as simple as this. I was playing one friend of mine that is a writer of the great success Veronica, the horror movie of Paco Plaza. And she loved to play video games in Super NES, Super Nintendo 8. And when he tried in my home to try a modern game, it was impossible for him because too many things going around. You have 2 sticks, you have 8 buttons, and you have tutorials of 1 or 2 hours to get the controls if you know how to move with these new controls. For him, it was impossible, and he was complaining all the time, why I don't have 1 stick and 2 buttons, like in the old age, why everything has to be so complicated. So this is something that we really have to look, and it has deep consequence because the control path is the gate to the games. But I think the gate is, is one of the biggest problems that we have now. So I think that the solution will be in the line of simplify the controls and recover a philosophy of the arcade days that every game should be very easy to pick from the get-go. and very hard to master. So I put here the, the images of a Master System control path and a PlayStation 5. And it's amazing how many stuff we have put into this. And I'm betting that we can do better, and many buttons there can be simplified or rethink to not being so complicated for new people. So conclusions are return to an arcade mindset, because in arcades, we have like a window or 1 minute to every new people coming to the arcade to get the game. And every game hasn't the luxury in that age to assume that the people coming were gamers. So you have one control stick and you have 2 or 3 buttons and you have to work with that. And it has to be fun from the first minute. You don't have 2 hours of tutorials. You have to be fun for the first minute. So that will, for the controls, I think also arcade mindset will help a lot on the fun aspect. The thing that Nakafama says that, we need to focus on the fun aspect of the game. Cinematography is great, visuals are great, but we need to focus on the fun, because the fun and the game side is what make us games, and we have to return to that. I think return to arcade mindset makes sense because of mobile market, because many games that are successful on mobile market and are in fact very old games, are games that we used to play 30 years ago, and suddenly they become new because there is a completely non-gamer audience discovering this, and that's a clue, and something that console and PC market can use. And also return to an arcade mindset will lower the barrier entry for non-gamers for all the reasons above, because suddenly they have something like in the mobile they can pick and start to play and have fun, and then they decide if they want to become deeper gamers. But we need this, these products that allows them to entry in the industry, and they are not always in the mobile. So finally, narrative. What I found always in narrative is, little nuance that I found in art, like why this character doesn't say anything in this situation, why it's not scared now, why it doesn't remember what happened 2 hours ago. This sort of things speaks to us to a expectation of character quality that we grow, very, very used to in TVs, because in TVs you have actors that do all this effort to keep a character very nuanced and very subtle. Of course, in games you have actors too, but I think we still haven't read the bridge between the actor and the avatar to become one in all the situations. I'm working on this very, very intense in Tequila, in how to bring the gap between the golden path, where everything is very reactive, and outside the golden path, when suddenly you go with an avatar to a cave where it's a monster, and the monster starts to glow, and more or less nothing happened. And if that monster will be, and that cave will be in the golden path, we will have a lot of stuff there. Of course, this is a production issue, but we have tools in many companies. Ourselves, we have one of these tools to make reactions and procedural reactions inside games. So we have to start to think on this, because I think it breaks the immersion a lot, especially for non-gamers. So the approach of narrative conclusion, so develop the presence of game avatars to allow to develop a deeper bond with the player. Develop the presence of game avatars, allow games to narrow the gap between TV and cinema, and we are going to compete directly with them, I'm sure. Develop the presence of game avatars will attract non-gamer cultural press to write about characters in games, as we have seen with The Last of Us 2, which is amazing. I finished it a couple of days ago, and it's one of the best examples in the industry of how to do this well. And develop the presence of game avatars empowers the depth of characters if we want to do transmedia strategies that are mandatory right now if we have a big, franchise. We cannot go only on one channel. We have to go to all the channels and try to do the best in every channel, because if not, it's very difficult to compete in the arena of big franchise right now and get attention. So the final slide will be great, but why bother ourselves? We have to do so many things each generation to keep with the all guys expectations of what all gamers want to the next generation. Why bother ourselves with all these problems for non-gamers that are not still here? Well, because I think exactly this, what you see in this shot, is happening very soon. This is a slice of Amazon, of Amazon Prime, and I'm convinced that very, very soon we will have mixed there, movies and games. So you will find a snapshot of Metal Gear 3 inside all the snapshots of TV shows and cinema, and the audience will choose between ones or the others. So we have to be very aware on how to get them, because choosing a TV show or a movie is click, but choosing a game is doing hard work, actually. So I think we need to rethink many things that we are doing in the industry now, to wait when we are in this point, we are prepared to compete as well as any other medium that's there. That's the end. That's all, folks, and thanks for listening.
That was fantastic. Thank you. Very intriguing topic. So you have 3 questions here.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if you've brought up the question window or you want me to facilitate. It's your choice.
If you can tell me the questions, I will answer.
Yeah. So the first question we have is, do you think the inverse is true? Can lessons learned from game design, art, and UI be applied to the real world to make our lives better?
Yeah, I think so, of course. We were seeing this, with VR anywhere, that VR is being applied and even being much more successful as a tool for the real world than as a new arena in games. So of course, this relationship is bidirectional, because non-gamer input can better games, but games, of course, in all their aspects, from UX to whatever, can get better the reality. So I totally agree with that perspective. I'm not hearing you now. Just a minute.
Oh, sorry. So do you think that the touchscreen is the most universally accessible controller that we have created so far? Or if not, how do we create a truly inclusive controller?
Well, I think we have to go to ground zero here, because every control of the new platforms that are coming are just iterations of the last one and the last one and the last one. And if you want to bring people that only play 8-bit age or haven't played anything at all, it's virtually impossible to do it with a PlayStation controller or Xbox controller. It's completely impossible. So we have to think, I think in 2 ways. One way will be how we could create controls for these platforms that reduce the amount of buttons and doesn't lose the amount of interactivity. So go for that and make that inclusive control very available in the market and marketize very well for everyone to know it. That will be one thing. But another thing that I think is even more important for the long-term approach, when the streaming platforms start to have everything inside, we have to come with another solution to manage all kinds of games without being so full of buttons, because this is going to break, it's going to make a impossible barrier between the non-gamers and gamers. It's true that that the newer generations of people are mostly gamers, so that's very good for the industry because they are used to. But to have the same amount of audience and numbers than movies and TVs, we have to do something there. And in the old age, we have Master System, NES, Game Boy, with very complex, full of deep games, and we only use 1 cross and 2 buttons. So it's not impossible at all to do this. We only need to think again about these things instead of being comfy and bet for the old control pad that we always use, because we know it works for gamers, but I really know that it doesn't work for non-gamers or ex-gamers.
Great. And so the final question you have, actually, you just had another one, but we're closing out on time. But designers have become better at adding modes for those with varying eyesight levels, color blindness, and other customization options, largely as a result of player feedback. What's the most common complaint you hear from the public regarding game design?
Regarding game design is, this thing about buttons, verbs, and tutorials. It's very easy in the old days of arcade days to pick up again and start playing, and you can be bad, you can be good, you can be in the middle, but you can start to play. And for many of these people that I'm, talking all the time, because this is really worries me, it's impossible just to play Resident Evil 7. This was the example I used. I use Resident Evil 7, and for my friend that is a horror writer, as I told you, he's a fan of the genre. It was impossible, too much going on, and he became frustrated. And I proved that with my father also, that was amazing playing, as I said, Game Gear, Sonic, and made 1 million points. And I tried to get him on to play a little bit of Red Dead Redemption 2. It was completely impossible to just move and interact with the scenarios. So we have a problem there, and it's a big one, I think.
Yeah. Well, so we have time for just a quick answer on this last question so we can get all the questions. So do you think there's any point where a non-gamer's input should not be considered? Like, how do you separate the good ideas from the bad ideas? I'm concerned that some non-gamers might start considering themselves experts and provide not so helpful feedback.
Mm-hmm. That will happen always when you ask feedback. I remember Brandon Sanderson, the great writer, telling that you must focus on the feeling side and not on the thought side. So I think that, if a non-gamer tried to do a lesson of how to integrate triggers, narrative triggers in a level, we are in trouble. Or how to design a mechanic, we are in trouble. But if it tells you it feels clunky, go for that. It's all about the feelings. And the feelings are very clear and extract, very clear conclusions. Like, we have too many buttons. And that's something very clear. And we have to solve that.
That's great. Well, thank you so much. That was a fascinating topic. And I think for a lot of us, we need to learn to listen to non-gamers a bit more. It's hard when we're kind of in our game development bubbles and, we're also game players. So that was great. Thank you again.